They say in Lagos, when a man's greed becomes his god, even his own tongue will betray him. On the night Lizzie set her trap, Alhaji Bello didn't know that the pot he was about to open would be the last pot he'd ever steal from. What he tasted that night didn't just send him to the hospital. It exposed a secret that had terrorized 15 families for 2 whole years. Before we continue with what happened next, if you are finding this story compelling, consider subscribing. We post new African stories every week, and your support allows us to keep bringing you these deeply interesting stories. Now, back to the story. This story begins in the heart of Bariga, Lagos, in a sprawling compound known to locals as Number 42. It wasn't the kind of place you'd find in travel magazines. No, this was where everyday Nigerians lived, struggled, dreamed, and sometimes suffered. The compound housed 15 families, each crammed into single rooms that opened into a shared courtyard. In the center of this courtyard sat the communal kitchen, a long, open structure with 15 cooking stations, each marked by blackened stones and the ghosts of 1,000 meals. The year was 2018, and among the tenants was the young woman named Lizzie Okafor. 26 years old, dark-skinned and sharp-eyed, Lizzie worked as a hairdresser at Tejuosho Market. She wasn't wealthy, far from it, but she had something more valuable, a clever mind and a stubborn heart that refused to accept injustice.
Lizzie had moved to Number 42 8 months ago, drawn by the cheap rent of 35,000 naira a month. The landlord, Alhaji Bello Kazim, was a portly man in his late 50s who always wore flowing agbada robes and a white prayer cap. He lived in the boys' quarters at the back of the compound, a privilege he called staying close to my people. But there was something strange about Alhaji Bello. Despite owning an entire compound, despite collecting rent from 15 families every month, despite his expensive clothes and 3 wives who lived elsewhere, nobody had ever seen him cook. Not once. Not a single tenant could recall the smell of stew coming from his quarters, or the sight of him buying groceries, or the sound of his pot bubbling on the fire. And yet, he never looked hungry. It started small, a missing piece of meat here, a reduced pot of soup there. At first, people blamed it on their own forgetfulness. Maybe I didn't cook as much as I thought, they'd say. But then it got worse. One Friday evening in March, Mama Chidi's scream shattered the compound's peace. Who did this? Who is this wicked soul? The tenants rushed to the kitchen to find Mama Chidi on her knees, weeping before her cooking fire. Her pot, which had contained a full pot of egusi soup prepared with her last 4,000 naira, was nearly empty. Only a thin layer of oil remained at the bottom. I just went inside to change my wrapper. I was gone for 5 minutes. 5 minutes! As the women gathered around her, consoling and clucking their tongues, something became clear. Mama Chidi wasn't the first victim. She was just the first to speak loudly about it. It happened to me last week, whispered Auntie Ngozi, a petty trader. Half my pot of jollof rice gone. And me, added Sister Blessing, my full pot of white rice and stew. I thought maybe I gave too much to my children, but one by one, the stories emerged. For nearly 2 years, someone had been stealing food from the communal kitchen, not just tasting, stealing entire pots, portions meant to feed families. The men gathered to investigate. They examined the kitchen, questioned the children, even checked the compound's high fence for signs of outsiders climbing in. Nothing. The thief was among them. Paranoia spread through Number 42 like harmattan dust. Neighbors who had borrowed sugar from each other now locked their doors. The elderly Mr. Adeyemi, who had lived in the compound for 12 years, suddenly became a suspect because he was too quiet. The gateman, Ibrahim, was accused because he was always looking around. Even the children weren't spared. Young Emeka was beaten by his mother after a neighbor claimed to have seen him near someone else's pot. The compound fractured into suspicious groups. People began cooking in shifts, staying to watch their pots like hawks. Some tenants bought small padlocks to lock their pot lids, a ridiculous sight that would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. But the thief was patient and clever.
One Wednesday night, Sister Blessing decided to catch the thief. She made a show of going inside her room while her soup cooked, but she hid behind the kitchen wall, watching. An hour passed. 2 hours. Her legs cramped. Just as she was about to give up, she heard it. Soft footsteps approaching her cooking station. Her heart pounded. This was it. She would finally see the thief's face. But when she jumped out to confront them, she found nothing. Just her pot, still covered, still bubbling peacefully. Yet when she lifted the lid, half her soup was gone. She screamed so loud that night that neighbors 3 compounds away heard her. "It's a spirit," she cried. "An evil spirit is stealing our food." Some of the older tenants began to believe her. They whispered about Aje, witches who could become invincible and steal people's fortune through their food. Alhaji Bello, hearing the commotion, came out of his quarters wearing only a wrapper tied around his protruding belly. "What is all this noise about?" he demanded, his voice heavy with sleep. When they explained, he shook his head sadly. "My people, we must pray. Perhaps someone has sent evil spirits to this compound. I will call my Alpha tomorrow for prayers." No one thought to ask why the landlord, who never cooked, seemed so well fed. The Alpha came as promised. A thin, bearded man in white robes. He walked around the compound, sprinkling blessed water and reciting Quranic verses. He charged Alhaji Bello 15,000 naira and declared the compound cleansed. For 3 days, nothing was stolen. The tenants rejoiced. "The spirits have left," they declared. But on the 4th day, it happened again. This time, it was Lizzie's turn. Lizzie had woken up at 5 a.m. to prepare her soup before heading to the market. She had bought fresh fish, crayfish, stockfish, and vegetables, a week's worth of food. She cooked carefully, lovingly, the way her late mother had taught her. By 7 a.m., her pot was ready, a rich aromatic offensala soup that could make a dead man's mouth water. She covered it carefully and went inside to bathe and dress for work. 15 minutes, that's all she was gone. When she returned to dish out her soup before leaving, her heart dropped. The pot was half empty. But unlike the others, Lizzie didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, her jaw tight, her eyes calculating. She had grown up in Onitsha, where they say, "Onye aguho ka mwere aguho kariaya." Every trickster meets a greater trickster. This thief, whoever they were, had just stolen from the wrong woman. That evening, Lizzie did something unusual. She went to the market and bought ingredients for another soup. The other tenants watched her curiously. Why would she cook again after being robbed in the morning? "Are you not afraid the thief will steal again?" Mama Chidi asked. Lizzie smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let them try," she said softly. She cooked that night another pot of soup, this time adding extra ingredients. But she didn't stay to watch it. She went inside her room, turned on her small radio loudly, and appeared to sleep. The compound watched. Several tenants stationed themselves in the courtyard, pretending to chat while secretly monitoring the kitchen. Around 9 p.m., when most people had gone inside, a figure emerged from the boys' quarters. Alhaji Bello, moving with surprising stealth for a man his size, walked casually toward the kitchen. But it was dark and he wore no lights. The watching tenants couldn't see clearly. Was he just passing by? checking on something, he disappeared into the kitchen's shadows. 3 minutes later, he emerged, walking back to his quarters with the same casual pace, one hand suspiciously near his mouth. The tenants who had been watching looked at each other confused. Had they just witnessed the theft? Or was the landlord just checking his property? When Lizzie came out at 10 p.m. to check her pot, it was untouched. The thief, it seemed, had sensed a trap. Lizzie realized the thief was smart, too smart to fall for an obvious trap. This would require something more subtle. She began to study the pattern. For 2 weeks, she watched the compound like a scientist observing rats in a lab. She noted when food went missing, whose pots were targeted, and most importantly, when they went.
She noticed something curious. The thief never stole when people were cooking late at night, or when multiple people were in the kitchen at once. The thief only struck when the kitchen was briefly empty, during transition times, early morning, late afternoon, or after everyone had eaten dinner and gone inside. And there was another pattern. The thief always knew which pots had the best food. Never did they steal from pots containing only beans or yam. Always the rich soups, the special meals, the expensive proteins. How could they know what was in a covered pot? Unless they had been watching the cooking from somewhere private, somewhere with a clear view of the kitchen. Lizzie's eyes drifted to the boys' quarters at the back of the compound. From Alhaji Bello's window, you could see everything, every pot, every tenant, every movement. One Sunday afternoon, Lizzie made her move. She announced to her neighbors that she was cooking a special celebration soup. Her sister had just gotten engaged and she was celebrating Igbo style. She cooked in full view, making a show of it. Premium fish, goat meat, stockfish, egusi, palm oil. The aroma filled the entire compound, drawing envious looks and hungry sighs. "Ah, Lizzie, you are really celebrating, oh," Mama Chidi said. "Yes, nah," Lizzie replied cheerfully. "When God blesses your family, you must celebrate properly." She cooked for 3 hours, stirring, tasting, adding spices. The pot bubbled magnificently, a crown jewel of culinary achievement. At exactly 5 p.m., Lizzie covered her pot and announced loudly, "I'm going to church for evening service. I'll come back to eat later." She walked out of the compound, making sure everyone saw her leave. But Lizzie didn't go to church. She circled around through the back alley and climbed onto the low roof of the adjacent building, a roofing she had scouted days earlier. From there, hidden behind a water tank, she had a perfect view of the kitchen below. The sun began to set. Orange light painted the compound. One by one, tenants went inside for the evening. The kitchen stood empty, Lizzie's pot still steaming slightly over the dying fire. 20 minutes passed. 30. 45. Then, just as darkness fully settled, a door creaked open. Alhaji Bello emerged from his quarters. He looked around carefully, left, right, listening. Then, satisfied he was alone, he moved swiftly to Lizzie's cooking station. From her hiding place, Lizzie's hands trembled with rage and vindication. The landlord, the man who collected their rent, who led prayers, who called them my people, he was the thief. Alhaji Bello lifted the pot lid. Even from the roof, Lizzie could see his face transform with greedy pleasure. He pulled out a piece of meat with his bare hand and shoved it in his mouth. Then another. Then he began scooping soup directly into his mouth with his fingers, slopping and swallowing like a starving dog. Lizzie watched, her jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Not yet. Not yet. After taking enough soup to feed 3 people, Alhaji Bello carefully replaced the lid, licked his fingers clean, and shuffled back to his quarters, satisfied. Lizzie climbed down from the roof, her mind racing. She had her proof, but who would believe her? The landlord could deny everything, and it would be her word against his. She needed more than evidence. She needed a confession. And for that, she needed a different kind of trap. The next day, Lizzie visited a chemist shop in Ojuelegba, far from her neighborhood. The pharmacist, a middle-aged Yoruba man with glasses, listened to her request. "I need something that will make someone very sick to their stomach," she said, "but not kill them. Just make them regret what they ate." The pharmacist frowned. "Madam, I cannot sell you poison." "It's not poison," Lizzie explained. "There's a thief in my compound. They've been stealing our food for 2 years. I want to teach them a lesson they will never forget." She told him the whole story, the suffering families, the suspicions, the paranoia, and finally the landlord's betrayal. The chemist removed his glasses and cleaned them thoughtfully. Finally, he said, "There is something. It's called castor oil, very concentrated. We also have syrup of ipecac. Both will cause severe purging and vomiting. Mix them with bitter aloes and senna leaf extract, and whoever consumes it will spend 3 days visiting the toilet." "But madam," he looked at her seriously, "you must be very careful. Too much can cause serious harm." "I don't want to harm him. I just want him to confess." The chemist sold her measured quantities, giving her strict instructions. Not more than 2 tablespoons of this mixture in a full pot of soup, and make sure the pot is big enough that it dilutes properly. If it takes too much concentrated, "I understand," Lizzie assured him. That evening, she began to cook, but this time she wasn't cooking food, she was cooking justice. She prepared the soup exactly as she normally would: fresh tomatoes, pepper, onions, palm oil, crayfish. It smelled divine. But into this pot, she added the special mixture the chemist had prepared, stirring it in carefully until it dissolved completely. The soup looked perfect, smelled perfect. No one could tell it was different. Lizzie also did something else. She told 3 trusted neighbors, Mama Chidi, Brother Tunde, and Sister Blessing, to hide and watch the kitchen that night. She didn't tell them why, just that they should see who approached her pot. "If you see anything suspicious," she said, "call everyone out. Don't confront the person alone." At 9:30 p.m., Lizzie made a show of covering her pot and going inside. The compound settled into its nightly rhythm. Children being called in, doors closing, the murmur of televisions and radios. From their hiding spots, Brother Tunde behind a pillar, Mama Chidi inside the kitchen storage room, and Sister Blessing crouched near the water drums, the 3 witnesses waited. At 10:15 p.m., right on schedule, Alhaji Bello's door opened. He emerged wearing only his wrapper and singlet, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who had done this 1,000 times. In the darkness, he looked different, no longer the respectable landlord, but a sneaking thief. He reached Lizzie's pot and lifted the lid. The aroma hit him and he smiled, a greedy, self-satisfied smile. He grabbed a piece of fish and ate it, then another. Then he began scooping the soup with his hand, drinking it directly, his throat working as he swallowed. "Now!" Mama Chidi's voice rang out. The 3 witnesses rushed out, followed immediately by other tenants who had heard the shout. Within seconds, the courtyard was full of people, and Alhaji Bello stood frozen at Lizzie's cooking station, soup dripping from his fingers, guilt painted across his face like palm oil. "Alhaji!" someone shouted. "It's the landlord!" another cried. "He's the thief! The landlord is the thief!" Alhaji Bello tried to speak, but his mouth was full of soup. He swallowed and stammered, No, I was checking if the fire was out for safety." "With your hand in the pot?" Brother Tunde roared. "You are a liar!" Mama Chidi screamed. "A thief and a liar!" Lizzie emerged from her room, her face calm, almost serene. She walked through the crowd until she stood before her landlord. "Alhaji," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the noise. "For 2 years, you have stolen from us, from poor people who can barely afford to feed their children. You collected our rent with one hand and stole our food with the other. Why?" Alhaji Bello's mouth opened and closed. In that moment, he looked less like a powerful landlord and more like a pathetic court rat. I don't cook," he mumbled. "My wives, they left me. I don't know how to cook. I was hungry." "Hungry?" Sister Blessing shrieked. "You own this whole compound. You have money for agbada and prayer caps, but not for food." "You are wicked," someone else shouted. The crowd pressed closer, their anger a palpable thing. For 2 years, they had suffered. For 2 years, they had suspected each other, fought with each other, and all along, it was the man who was supposed to protect them. But Lizzie raised her hand. "Wait," she said. "Let's see how he enjoys the soup he stole." 10 minutes later, as the tenants continued to berate him, Alhaji Bello's face changed. His skin, already dark, took on a greyish tinge. Sweat broke out on his forehead. I don't feel well," he muttered, clutching his stomach. "Good," someone shouted. "May the food poison you." But Lizzie watched carefully. The chemist's mixture was working faster than she'd expected. Alhaji Bello's eyes widened. His hand pressed harder against his belly. "The toilet. I need... He didn't finish. His body answered for him. Right there, in front of everyone, Alhaji Bello's bowels betrayed him spectacularly. What happened next could only be described as biblical in its thoroughness. Alhaji Bello ran for the toilet, a run interrupted every few steps by urgent necessity. The sounds that emerged from that toilet that night became legendary in the compound. For 3 hours, he didn't stop, purging from both ends, sweating, groaning, crying out. His arrogance purged along with everything else. By 2 a.m., he was so weak he could barely stand. Brother Tunde and 2 other men, despite their anger, took pity and helped him to a taxi. They rushed him to the general hospital in Yaba. The doctors ran tests, pumped his stomach, gave him IV fluids. When they asked what he'd eaten, he couldn't lie. The evidence was too clear. "Soup," he whispered. "I ate soup that wasn't mine." The doctor, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, looked at him with disgust. "You are lucky," she said. "Whatever was in that soup could have killed you if you'd eaten more. As it is, you'll need to stay here for observation. Your stomach and intestinal lining are severely irritated." For 3 days, Alhaji Bello remained in the hospital, connected to tubes, humiliated beyond measure. Word spread throughout Bariga about the landlord who stole from his tenants and got punished by poison soup. People he had known for years came to visit, not to comfort him, but to mock him. Alhaji Thief, they called him, the pot licker. When Alhaji Bello was finally discharged, he returned to number 42, a changed man. Gone was the prideful bearing, the expensive robes. He wore a simple shirt and trousers, and his eyes couldn't meet anyone's gaze. The tenants gathered in the courtyard. They had discussed among themselves what to do. Press charges? Demand he sell the property? Evict him from his own compound? But it was Lizzie who spoke first. "Alhaji," she said, her voice firm but not cruel. "You stole from people who trusted you. You violated the sacred bond between a landlord and his tenants.
Some of us went hungry because of you. Children cried because their mothers had no food to give them. You created suspicion and hatred in a place that should have been a community. What do you have to say? Alhaji Bello knelt down, a proud man brought to his knees. Tears ran down his face. I have no excuse, he said, his voice breaking. I was greedy. I was lazy. My wives left me because I refused to change, because I thought I was better than everyone else. Instead of asking for help, instead of learning to cook or hiring someone, I chose to steal. I chose the path of shame. He looked up at them, his eyes red. I stole from Mama Chidi when she was saving money for her daughter's school fees. I stole from Brother Tunde when he was trying to feed his 5 children. I stole from Sister Blessing when she was recovering from illness. I knew what I was taking, and I did it anyway. His voice dropped to a whisper. I am not worthy to be called your landlord. I am not worthy to collect your rent. I am a thief, and I am ashamed. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Mama Chidi spoke. You want forgiveness? She asked. Then earn it. The tenants agreed on terms. For the next 6 months, Alhaji Bello would reduce everyone's rent by half. He would also learn to cook. Sister Blessing agreed to teach him. And he would personally cook 1 meal a week for the entire compound, a meal they would share together. Moreover, he would renovate the communal kitchen properly, adding locks for each cooking station so everyone could secure their pots. And Alhaji, Lizzie added, if you ever steal again, even a grain of rice, we will not use soup to punish you. We will take you to court and ensure you lose this property. Do you understand? I understand, he whispered. Thank you. Thank you for your mercy. As the weeks passed, something remarkable happened. Alhaji Bello kept his word. He learned to cook, clumsily at first, burning rice and over-salting soup, much to the amusement of the compound, but he persisted. His first communal meal was a disaster, half-cooked beans and burnt plantain, but people ate it anyway, some laughing, some teasing him gently. By the 3rd month, he could make a decent jollof rice. By the 6th month, his egusi soup was actually good. More importantly, the compound changed. Where there had been suspicion, there was now unity. Where there had been division, there was now community. The weekly communal meals became a tradition that continued long after the 6 months ended. Alhaji Bello never stole again. In fact, he became known as a generous landlord, often reducing rent for tenants going through hard times and never evicting anyone without first trying to help them. And Lizzie, she became something of a legend. They called her the woman who trapped a landlord. And mothers told their daughters, be like Lizzie, clever, brave, and merciful. One evening, months later, as the compound gathered for their weekly meal, Alhaji Bello raised his cup of zobo drink and said, there is an Igbo proverb that my tenant Lizzie taught me. Onye ji ihe onye ozo, o makwa na obu ihe onye ozo. Whoever holds what belongs to another knows it belongs to another. I knew I was stealing. I knew it was wrong, but greed made me ignore my conscience. He looked around at all of them. Today I want to say, Ike Aguiya. The strength is exhausted. My greed has been defeated not by anger or violence, but by wisdom and mercy. Thank you, all of you, for teaching this old fool how to be human again. As they ate together that night, sharing food freely, no one stealing, no one suspecting, the lesson was clear. Greed reduces even landlords to thieves, but mercy can transform thieves into human beings again.
This story reminds us that sometimes the worst poverty is not in our pockets, but in our character. A man who has everything but still steals is poorer than a beggar who has nothing but shares what little he has. And remember, when you must teach someone a lesson, let it be one that corrects, not one that destroys. Lizzie could have poisoned Alhaji Bello fatally. She could have had him arrested and shamed permanently. Instead, she chose a path that brought both justice and redemption. If you enjoyed this story of wisdom, justice, and second chances from the heart of Lagos, subscribe to this channel for more authentic African folktales. Share this with someone who needs to hear that no matter how far we fall, there's always a chance to rise again if we're willing to humble ourselves and change. Drop a comment and tell us, where are you watching from? And have you ever dealt with a thief in your community? How did you handle it? Until then, remember, the pot that catches a thief can also cook forgiveness.